Good day, everyone. My name is Kent Noble, and I teach business ethics at the University of Wyoming. And with us today, we have a really special guest. His name is Dave Hoerman, and Dave is the former Chief Wisdom Officer for a company called DaVita. And if you're not familiar with DaVita, it's located down in Denver, and it's a Fortune 200 company. And I got to be introduced to Dave through his daughter, Meredith, who just happens to be in my class this semester. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Kent. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, I just want to be honest, your former title, Chief Wisdom Officer, I think that may be the coolest title I've ever heard of. I'm hopeful that you can tell us just a little bit about your role when you were with DaVita. And as I understand it, you were in charge of helping DaVita create its values and also its culture, which is just fascinating to me. So I'd also like to hear about that. So the floor is yours, Dave.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Kent. And you're not the first person to ask me about this title. So yeah, I just left DaVita, retired from DaVita and left not long ago, actually, a couple months ago. And I still miss the people dearly, but it was just the right time for me to move for personal reasons, especially. But yeah, the wisdom thing was prior to me having that job title, Kent. So it wasn't like I went into a company and said, I'm going to be the Chief Wisdom Officer. So it wasn't a declaration as much as it was the original Chief Executive Officer, the original CEO, is the one who said, I want a team and I want to call it wisdom. And he had a really good purpose for this. If you look up learning or education or training in the dictionary, you'll see definitions like, teaching people skills and knowledge that they need to do their job better. And that's fine. And that's really important and critical in any organization. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to take that a step further. And our culture is kind of aligned with this. And that is that we wanted people to experience the company DaVita as more like a community, a place where if they came and lived with us for a while, they were going to leave a better human being. Okay. The word wisdom, right? The definition of the word wisdom is, to gain knowledge about yourself and to understand yourself, get more self-confident and reflection in order to have a more purposeful, meaningful life. And that's really what we were after. When we say Chief Wisdom Officer, I was in charge of this team called Wisdom. And what we did was, we did own the symbols, the language, the traditions within the company, the teachings, the leadership development, the human development, helping people find joy and meaning in their life. And oh, by the way, the amazing thing is if you treat people like that and help people gain more knowledge of themselves, it's amazing how much they can do out there for the customers, for the patients. In our case, we're a very large dialysis company and in healthcare. And so here we are, we're taking care of hundreds of thousands of patients. Well, we certainly customer service was really important, but what was important to my team was I need to help the people who are doing the service. I want to help them be self-confident and conscious about who they are and their meaning and purpose so they can find joy in their work. And then, and only then, can they serve the patients, if that makes sense. So that's what
it absolutely does. I love that. It's that stakeholder orientation approach that we talk about in class where it's not all about the bottom line. It's about making sure your stakeholders, in your case, you're talking about your employees, feel wanted, feel valued, that they're part of the fabric of the organization. Because as you and I both know, finding, recruiting, and training people is a very expensive proposition. But if we can hang on to the good ones we have, that's a leg up.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that was, we built this thing because we wanted to create this idea of community. We called ourselves the DaVita Village. We have a lot of weird words for things. We had a lot of weird words for things at DaVita, but the idea was very serious in that if you're a community and you're a village, you're going to do the right thing for the citizens of that village. And so that was the way we saw it. And we didn't proclaim to be right or wrong. I want to make sure that your students don't think, man, who is this guy? He thinks his culture was the best, or our culture was right. It really came down to, I think every company has a culture. It's just, you have to decide how intentional or unintentional you want that culture to be. And so we weren't good or bad. We were just simply extremely intentional about our culture, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense to me, because you're right. Every organization has a culture, and you need to make sure you're trying to create what it is you want, for sure. And I love that term, intentional. That makes total sense. So I understand the culture side of it and love it. Thank you for that. How about values? Did you have a set of principles or values that that you identified, and how did that process work?
Yeah, it was an amazing process. It was just before I had gotten there. There was a previous chief wisdom officer named Yoda, of course. Because
Love it.
And so and so I came in just after these were chosen. But the beauty of DaVita is that, number one, even the name DaVita was chosen by the people, right? If you're going to be a community, then it needs to be a democracy, and the democracy lives only when you allow people to truly choose things. So our people chose the name of the company. They chose the values. We ended up with originally 6 values: service excellence, integrity, team, continuous improvement, accountability, and fulfillment. So we had these 6 values that the people said, this is the way we want to live in this community.
Okay.
And so they took it very seriously. There was a big voting process. And then later on, the community itself spoke up and said, there's one thing missing that we wish we had, and that is fun. We wish fun was an official core value. We went through a big democratic process. We added fun. So now 7 core values. So the beauty of the core values is that there was buy-in right away, because we all work together as the people in the community to choose how we wanted to behave with each other. And I know you talked a little bit about how in your classroom you have a code of conduct.
Yes.
And I love it, because even I think about the word code, right, is all about an agreement. It's about the people deciding, this is the code we want to live by, and now and only now can we hold each other accountable for those values or that code.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Dave. All right, so you bring up our code. Prior to our meeting, I sent you the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative Principles. Just to refresh your memory, we're talking about integrity, trust, accountability, transparency, fairness, respect, rule of law, and viability. And so, Dave, we use these principles in our classroom in a number of different ways. We also use them as a framework to help us make ethical decisions when it could be a class project where we're looking at a case, or maybe it's a situation we actually have in class. I'm just curious, did DaVita or any of the current clients you have now, because I know you're doing some consulting, is there a framework that you utilized or you particularly like that maybe you could share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we almost had a way of deciding. There was a lot of DaVita way of, just like Southwest Airlines has a way of doing things. We have a way of doing things. And so for a little while, we just called it the DaVita way of deciding. But the bottom line was, it was kind of twofold. The first thing is that you've got to have role models at the top that are doing this, that are using the code. So the first thing that's really simple, it's almost not a framework as much as it is, if you have a meeting and a C-level officer is sitting in that meeting, at the end of a long discussion and a decision-making process, somebody, and especially the C-level officer, should say at the end of the meeting, okay, we think we have our decision. Does this align with our values?
Yeah.
Does this make us a healthy community? Does this help the patients? So we had a way, kind of a 5-part question to this, and that was, does it match our mission and values? Does it show that we care? And not just caring for our patients, but caring for each other. Does this create community? Does this show ownership and stewardship? Are we being good stewards of our resources? Is it safe? And is it compliant? And if we're not answering yes to all those questions, man, we better relook at the decision we just made. And so, this idea of role modeling is really important. It's not just that having that conversation, it's somebody being mindful enough to bring it up and have the courage to bring it up every time. I'm sure you've been in meetings, Kent, where, everybody's finished, they've gone through an hour of deliberation, now there's 2 minutes left, and everybody just wants to move on to the next meeting.
Right.
It takes somebody's courage to say, time out, something doesn't feel right. This doesn't align with our mission and values. Does this feel right? Or does this feel wrong to anybody else? And so it really does take courage to call time out and state this in your meetings to say, does this align with our ethics? Does this align with our core value of integrity, our core value of accountability? And if not, we need to talk some more. And we were very, very deliberate about doing that.
Well, the fact that people felt safe to step forward and state those concerns, I think that gets back to your culture again, doesn't it, Dave?
Yes, it really does. How you respond and react to people, this is a beautiful point that you make, because all it takes is one time for somebody that's not the C-level officer to bring something up and everybody shut them down. They'll never say it again. They'll never bring it up again.
You're right.
So creating a culture that not only allows people to speak up, right? That democracy, that culture that says it's not only okay for you to bring this up, but if you're not proactively bringing this up, I'm going to call you on it. If you if later on down the line, I hear that you had a problem with this decision because you thought we were out of integrity, but you didn't bring it up, that's what I'm going to have a problem with. And so encouraging your teams and your leaders that it's a super safe environment, but also that they are steward, they own this place too. And the culture only lives if everybody is willing to bring this stuff up, ask the hard questions.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so getting back to those principles that I just mentioned to you, the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative principles, we do try to establish those as our classroom code. I want the students to evaluate me based on those principles, and what's fair is fair. I should be able to evaluate them on those principles as well. Any tips from your perspective that might help us build those into our classroom culture? Certainly leadership is going to be important. I have to fully embrace these principles. I believe not only just in the classroom, but personally as well. But any tips you may have for me that could help us in the classroom would be very welcomed.
Well, I'm honored that you would ask for tips, but I'm just going to, I'll give you more. This is how I see it, and this is what I believe around this. And then hopefully it is helpful for you or your students, but
fair enough.
I can certainly speak. I think I'd be overstating if I said I'm going to give you tips, Kent. So but I'll tell you, there's two things I loved about your code. The word code and the word conduct are beautiful. Number one, your word code. Code means that you have agreements. And like I mentioned before, in relationships, a lot of times we have expectations, and some of those expectations can be spoken or unspoken. But agreement is different. A code is different. A code is stated, it's written, it's on a wall. And now you all can hold each other accountable for it. It could be a student catching another student. It could be you, the professor, catching the student. It could be the student catching you, the professor, like you said, right? So the beauty is I love the word code. You've made it available to everybody, and we all can agree upon it. The second word, conduct, is critical, critical, critical. And this is the part that we really try to articulate at DaVita. And that is that, this is not about belief. This is about practice and behavior, right? So conduct, the very word conduct means this is your behaviors, and your behavior after behavior after behavior become your culture in your classroom. And so that stuff adds up. Anybody, if you asked any of the students, you said, do you believe in integrity? Well, every student's going to say, of course I believe in integrity. Do you believe lying is good? No, I don't believe lying is good. Right? So we can all say what we believe in this stuff, but our founding CEO, Kent Theory, he used to say, not violating a core value doesn't mean you're living it. So he used to say, I could go a month and not tell a lie, but that doesn't mean I'm living integrity. That just means I haven't lied in the past month. Living the core value of integrity is when it hurts, when I've done something wrong or embarrassing or shameful, and I don't have to tell anybody, but I choose to tell them anyway, right? So that's a conduct of integrity, that's a behavior and a practice that goes beyond, just the belief. And so my thought on bringing this stuff to life, I love that you've got the code of conduct. I'd say it's probably two pieces. Say it, talk about it every single day. Has anybody seen anything in our conduct that as a class we should be concerned about?
Yeah.
So there's the say piece of it, but then there's also the do, right? So asking people to call each other out on it and doing activities around it. I'll give you one example. We used to do report cards. They're just like back in grade school. And we would do a report card on every value, including integrity and accountability. And I would have to give myself a grade, my team a grade, and then my team would grade me on whether they thought I was living a life of integrity.
Wow.
I'll tell you, you want a real fast, reality check on whether you're living integrity or not. Boy, your team will, if you've given them the permission to speak up, they will. And so simple things like, having a report card activity with your class and saying, how have you done and how's our class done in living the core, our code of conduct of integrity, and let's talk about it. Let's make it okay to talk about. So that's just an idea, but just, this stuff is really important to bring out in activities and on paper and in real life, to just keep talking about it, because boy, that's how it lives. It doesn't live on a wall. It lives in our hearts, in our minds, and out in the open.
Well, I got to tell you, I love that idea. I really do. And professionally within DaVita, I also love that it sounds like employees weren't just evaluated on their skills, but also on adherence to the company values. So that kind of brings a question to mind for me. Would an employee, before they maybe received a bonus or a raise or a promotion, do they get evaluated on both, again, skills and the adherence to the company values? I'm guessing maybe that's the case.
Absolutely. It was this beautiful reinforcement. So there were kind of those unofficial ways to bring this stuff up and talk about it. So things like the fun, silly, simple, elementary school report card. So that's a way to have dialogue. People's performance reviews, absolutely. I always said there were kind of two axes. On the x-axis was your performance. It was how well did you get done what you were supposed to get done.
Right.
On your y-axis was your behaviors in getting that stuff done, right? Because you can be a great performer and leave dead bodies in your wake, and that's not who we want in a healthy community, right? Who we want in a healthy community is somebody that people want to be around, that lives the core value of service excellence, but also lives the core value of fun and fulfillment. And so, yes, we would rate people. Every performance review rated each value and how well you were doing against those values. We have definitions for the values, and how well did you live it from a scale of 5 to 1. How well did you do?
Well, I think that really helps express the importance of the company culture and values when employees are actually evaluated on it. And I love your idea of me and the students, us evaluating each other on a form. A little report card. I think that's a great idea. And again, a great way to help us build that into our culture. So thank you for that recommendation. I guarantee it'll be implemented.
That's very cool. I hope my daughter gets at least a B. I don't know what I should hope for there.
That's funny. So you mentioned your founder, and you gave the example of integrity, and so that made me think of Bill Daniels and the founder of the Daniels Fund. And Bill just believed that ethics and integrity, they were the ultimate business advantage. And I'm just curious, what do you think? You think he was right?
Yeah, I think he's actually dead on right. I love Bill Daniels. I love the Daniels Foundation and everything that they stand for. So I love that you're using them as the as the role model. The interesting thing about a guy like Bill Daniels, right, is he did it because he chose to do it, right? It's almost like he was being ethical about being ethical. And I know this sounds kind of weird, but people can smell your intentions, right? They know whether you're doing it just to sell a customer or sell a widget or the health of the business long-term because you want to make a lot of money. People can smell it eventually. You might be good at faking that kind of thing for a while, but man, eventually integrity, trust, all of those values that you talked about with the Daniels Fund, you can only fake that stuff for so long. And a guy like Bill Daniels, he stood for it. He chose it. He did it for himself. He did it because he firmly believed that that was what was right to do. And then what he trusted was that the ripple effect would happen. And it did. I mean, people that were around Bill Daniels, I believe, were more ethical because you were around Bill Daniels. I think I was better in my ethical journey because I was around some of the people like Kent Theory and Yoda and all these other people that I was around in the beginnings of DaVita because they were ethical. And so it led me to be, more intentional about being ethical. So I think he's right on. And I think this is relationships 101. Forget companies for a second. What do we look for in a relationship? What do we look for in people that we want to surround ourselves with?
Yeah.
We want to surround ourselves with, right? Ethical people that are trustworthy. Then and only then can we find joy and have fun with them and do good work with them and all the other things that we want out of life. It all starts with, but can I trust them? And so I think the beauty of what Bill had was he was trustworthy, and so that everybody else around him was trustworthy. And then all of those relationships continued to ripple out all the way to the customers. I think people trusted all of the organization's human beings and leaders because of Bill Daniels and what he stood for, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I love what you said because, well, I never got a chance to meet the man. He passed away in 2000. But I can't tell you, Dave, how many people I've spoken to who knew him and knew him very well. And what I always think is so interesting is inevitably, it always comes back to the man's integrity. They always talk about how that was what he was known for. Yeah. And so I wanted to make that point, following up on what you said. The other term you used that really caught my attention, and it's one I just love, is ripples. Because I really think that's how we make the impact with our lives. Those ripples are so important. And the beauty about ripples, of course, is they have no logical end to them. They can go on perhaps in perpetuity. So I love that you made that point. The other thing I wanted to say, and you're the guy we want to interview, so I'm talking too much. But anyway,
no, this is great. This is great.
I do want to make one point that 2 days ago, I saw a former boss of mine, a gentleman by the name of Brent Hathaway. More than a boss, a dear friend, a mentor. I believe perhaps the most principled guy I've ever met. And I sent a picture of him to my wife and to my in-laws, and I said, I just got to spend 90 minutes with Brent Hathaway, and I left there wanting to be a better person. So there are those ripples that you were just talking about.
I mean, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that. It is so true. I mean, I think I always go back to my dad. My dad is the one I always say is my ultimate role model for the word integrity. He's always taught me that through my life. I am deeply, deeply grateful for him in teaching me that. He was the foundation for me in this, and the importance of it, and that, just always do the right thing, and the right things will return to you. And so, isn't it beautiful? We both have somebody in our life, at least one, if not more, that have taught us this through the years. Kent, I completely agree with you.
Well, Dave, and another thing we have in common, and I know this because you and I chatted before we started this interview, is you have 3 kids. I have 3 kids. You were just talking about your dad and the impact he had. Don't we both hope that we have that kind of impact on our kids? I would say that if I leave this earth and I'm able to leave that behind, that will feel like a true success.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And our students should hear this, right? I mean, your students in your class should know that this is not something that's going to happen somewhere down the road. I think sometimes we tend to think, well, when we're younger, we're probably not a role model for somebody. You are. If you're showing this video to your students, I want all your students to know right now you're being a role model. Other people are watching you right now in this classroom, and they're watching what you do. And so if you don't think you have an impact on others in your work groups or other students, you're just wrong. You do. And when you speak up about the right thing to do, and you speak up about ethics and integrity, and you build trust in your relationships, I will tell you, it will ripple out, and it starts now. It's happening.
Well, that's a great point. I think people, all of us, we need to realize that people are watching. They'll notice how we live our lives, for better or for worse. You will be impacting others, and it's an important consideration, and especially as a leader in industry like you. And I always say to my colleagues as well, we have this rare privilege of being in front of students in a classroom. We better be living our lives in a principled fashion, both personally and professionally. Sure, we're going to mess up, but we need to really put a lot of energy and effort into that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regarding leadership, can you talk to me a little bit about your leadership style and maybe how ethics factored into that equation for you?
Yeah, so I will tell you, there's never been a shortage of screw ups for me as a leader.
Amen. I hear you.
I continue to be a student, so I'm not doing any of this, right. I'm just working really hard to be better and better and learn from my mistakes, which is really the point. I mean, leadership is to me, leadership is a relationship. So for me, just like we just talked about, to me, this is about trust. You ask leadership and how that is, how ethics plays in. Ethics is, to me, foundational. I mean, you can't be a leader without having credibility and having vision, right? Those are the two things that I think a leader has. And that's all about having relationships with people and being trustworthy. And when you screw up, admit it. I used to have a saying, there's the on stage and off stage, right? And what you do on stage and off stage, both those things matter equally as intensely. In my job, I happened to be I had the honor of speaking in front of thousands of people all the time. I was up on stage a lot, and I would be teaching human skills and all that kind of stuff. And then I would come down off stage, and I would inevitably have, we call them teammates at DaVita, not employees, we call them teammates, so that it's just a reminder that we're all in this together. And so I would have teammates come to the backstage or side stage or come into the back of the room and just say, hey, do you mind if I pick your brain? I need to ask you some questions. They were watching me as much or even more intensely about how I was handling things off stage as I was on stage, And so I always think about that, as a leader. I ought to think about myself as a leader when I'm in the grocery store, how I treat the person who's waiting on me at a restaurant. It doesn't matter where I am or whether I'm officially the boss of somebody. To me, leadership is about relationships every single day. Am I leaving somebody feeling better than they did before they saw or met me, or am I leaving them feeling worse? And I always looked at it that way, is that, if I screw that up, I'm going to say that I screwed it up, and I'm going to ask them for forgiveness, and I'm going to tell them I'm going to try harder next time. So, it's really just being authentic with people. My gut is just being authentic with people is so important.
Dave, I got to tell you, I'm buying everything you're selling.
I'm not making it up either. I'm not.
No, I love it. I know you're not. And you're so authentic. And I really do appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So one of the things we try to do in our class is help our students build a brand that is based on integrity and character, etc. My question for you is, when it comes to finding talent, you're now looking for employees. How important is character, and how do you evaluate people for character during the hiring process? It seems to me that's a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because, I mentioned earlier, people can kind of snow you for a while.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know, people can say, "Oh, I believe in integrity," and then give you these made-up stories, and who knows whether it's true or not. And so I will tell you honestly, I have done brilliantly well. I've gotten an A plus sometimes in hiring, and I've gotten a D minus sometimes in hiring. So I've been I've been all over the board with this. But a couple of thoughts for you. Number one, I absolutely pay attention to character and integrity and ethics and all those things when I'm hiring somebody. In fact, I pay way more attention to how I feel around somebody than I do the skills themselves. You know, they have to have a certain level of skills to do the job. I'm not gonna, you know, let's face it, right? Somebody can't, you know, go into a job where they have no experience and couldn't handle the basic tasks of the day. But beyond that, everything I'm looking for is how that person handles being off stage, you know, not on stage. So I try to kind of dive in. I always invite a candidate, you know, invite them out to lunch, go to dinner, hang out, see how they interact at home, you know, as much as you can do to see them in real life, you know, because I think that kind of takes down some of the walls and allows people to start to say, you know, this is what they're really like behind the scenes. You know, and we can ask, certainly there's interview questions we've developed, things that I've asked people about a time when they were out of integrity and how to, you know, what happened and how they deal with that. I've asked certainly the interview questions around, you know, within our core values of accountability and integrity, tell me real life situations or a future. I'm going to give you a scenario. What would you do? And they can't be false, crappy scenarios that it's a really easy answer. It's got to be stuff where, frankly, there are 3 answers and every single one of them is right. So which one would you choose and why? And so it's really tough. It's not an easy thing to hire for. But I always say, get to know somebody personally, because, you know, despite the fact that we're in big companies sometimes, or you're going to get a job in an organization, that organization is made up of human beings. And the way that you get to know human beings is you get to know them as a human being. And that's about all I could offer on that one. It's not easy.
Well, I like what you said. I especially like the offstage part. It reminded me, we had a speaker that we brought to the college. He did a great job and it was likable. We went out to dinner and he made a comment to the waitress that I thought, that's not good.
Yeah.
And it changed everything.
Yes.
And so, you know, that offstage approach that you're talking about is a great way to learn a lot about people. You know, how people treat people without power. You can learn a whole lot about someone.
Well said. Yeah, that's a beautiful example. And that's exactly right. And it's funny, right? All of that time that you spent with that person and then one little comment, honestly, that's usually the piece that you're looking for. Yeah. I mean, you know, because we easily, you know, dismiss it. We easily say, well, we're going to justify that. Well, maybe he was having a bad day or whatever it is. Typically, it's the 2%, not the 98%. Watch for the 2%. That's where you find out about somebody's integrity.
I love that tip. Great tip. Okay, so Dave, a concept that we try to convey in class is doing what is right prevails over self-interest when the two appear to be in conflict. And I'm just wondering, can you think of maybe a time where maybe at DaVita or maybe with one of your firms you're consulting with where that principle was practiced, or maybe something you did personally? I hate to put you on the spot. But,
no, it's a great one. Yeah, there have been many times where I've been out of integrity or put to the test. One time I failed is that I came up with an idea. I executed on an idea. My team brought it to life. It landed really badly. And I did not come forward right away to say that it was my idea.
I see.
You know, and I'll tell you, it was one of those things where days went by and it was almost like it was eating me from the inside out.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it. It was awful. And I finally talked to one of the leaders and said, hey, I gotta tell you, this was not my team's fault. And I screwed up and I thought I was giving really good advice and it's my bad. And I felt, you know, there's this immediate weight that was lifted off, but I shouldn't have waited 2 days to say that. I mean, because I kept thinking it was going to go away, Kent, you know, it's, you know, when they say, oh, you know, it'll go away, it'll dissipate, it'll disappear. I can get away with this without having to say it. But here's the thing, right? We can justify that we had to do that. Well, I'm a leader. I had to do that. I had to keep my credibility, whatever it is. You know, that's all a bunch of bull. The bottom line is we know when we're out of integrity. We know it. We can feel it. And so I've never regretted actually speaking up eventually and saying the right thing, but I have screwed that up. And it typically comes in that form. It's the nature of I didn't speak up when I screwed up. And I've never been sorry when I did eventually screw up. And again, people are looking for that. You know, I could be on stage with 1,000 people and say, I want to say that during that last break, I screwed up. One of you asked me a question and I didn't answer it honestly, so I want to come clean. It's amazing how many people will come up to you afterward and say, thank you. You know, I'd rather you screw up and tell me you screwed up than try to say I was really smart, but you didn't get it or something like that, right? So, you know, it's just about self-preservation, right? Why do we do this stuff? Why does sometimes self-interest prevail over doing what's right? Well, because we want to look good. It's scary to be, you know, vulnerable, and it's shameful and it's embarrassing, and we think it's going to hurt us, and it's just our brain protecting us. If we can get beyond that to say, no, do the right thing and let the chips fall, boy, it feels so much better.
Well, I love the point you're making, because it is so refreshing when someone does own a mistake, because you're right. We try to avoid having to do that at all costs. And so when someone does step up, again, I use the term, it's refreshing, and it helps build trust. And because we all make mistakes.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you about this. We believe that a critical component of leadership is self-knowledge. So we take time, and a fair amount of time, Dave, during the semester to help our students create what we call their own personal code of ethics. We start with the foundation of ethical principles, the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative principles. That's our foundation. And then upon that, we have our students create some personal principles. And I think this is important for a few reasons. Number one, though, is when we turn them loose out there to go pursue jobs, we want to make sure that they're finding work relationships, places where they can work, where their values are in alignment with where they're going to go to work. So that, to me, is really important. But I guess I want to just generally think or ask you, what do you think about this exercise?
Oh my gosh, I love that exercise. I absolutely love it. We did something similar at DeVita, where we would have people decide on what their personal credo is. You know, who am I? What do I believe in? What do I believe is right? What do I believe is wrong? How do I want to live my life? And then we have them honestly assess, how do you align with DeVita's values, the culture we're trying to create, and all these things. And you know, a lot of people would say, well, that's crazy, that's scary, because you have people deciding who they are. What if they leave? And my answer is good. You know, if they leave because they weren't aligned with who we are, that's a good thing. They're going to go find a place where they're better aligned. There are not many, so kudos to you for this, because professors, I don't know a whole lot of professors that do this kind of work, and it's really, really important work. Students need to know who they are. They need to know who they are in their own words, so that they can join an organization and know, you know, they're going to join an organization and decide whether they feel like they belong or not. And they can do a job for maybe a year or two, but if they're really going to make a career out of this, they're only going to stay if they feel like they belong, if they align. And if they don't align, they might not even know how to articulate it. They might just say, you know, this just doesn't feel like the place for me. But what you're giving them is you're giving them a specific language to recognize that, right? So now when I go into company X, and boy, company X allows people to be late for meetings. They're allowed to just kind of cover up their screw ups and all that kind of stuff. And yet, here's my core values. That doesn't feel right. All of a sudden, I think your students are going to be able to handle that and understand that, oh, this is why I don't feel right around these people. This is why I don't feel right around this culture. That I think is absolutely just critical. So good for you. You're giving them their own words, their own language, their own beliefs. I think that's beautiful.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Listen, you've been a wealth of knowledge. I'm so appreciative of you sharing your time with us. And I'm just wondering, as we kind of wrap this discussion up today, any words, final words of wisdom that maybe you would like to pass on to the next generation of business and community leaders?
Yeah, I think it's probably do as I say, not as I do. No, I'm just that's a joke. That's a joke. No, I think boy, my advice is you're something you said earlier, right? We're gonna make mistakes. Yeah. We all do. We're all going to screw up because we're human beings, and we are all about kind of self-preservation. And so my request more than it is anything else for your students or anybody listening is just, boy, go ahead and make the mistakes, but then learn from them, recover from them, you know, and continue to learn about yourself. What are your trends? Where do you screw up? You know, what's your core beliefs, but speak them out loud. You know, speak the stuff out loud, go ahead and try it out, screw it up, and then recover. And I think that's the best that any of us can do around these things. You know, we all have role models. Surround yourself with those role models, but yeah, you're still going to screw up, and just allow yourself to screw up, and then be patient with yourself as you learn and grow. But I just want to say thank you. This is such a critical topic, especially in this day and age. So I love that you're teaching this, Kent, and just thank you. This has been really fun, and just thanks for having me on.
It's funny you say it was fun, because I was just thinking to myself, I can't remember a time where I enjoyed a conversation so much. And so I appreciate you. I'm going to ask a favor. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Will you come back and do this again?
Yeah, definitely.
You're great.
Definitely.
Eventually we'll be able to get you live in front of students. And I learned so much. I know our students are going to learn a lot. And I really appreciate you, Dave. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kent. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. Take care.
All the best to you.
Thanks.